This video is going to cover our Unit 1 Learning Target 4. Unit 1's on linear functions, and Learning Target 4 revolves all around the graphing of them. Our EQ this time is going to be, how do you graph a linear function? What are all the pieces and steps that entails the actual graphing of any kind of linear function? There's a few definitions that you need to know. The first definitions are intercepts. Our y-intercept and our x-intercept. This is where the graph crosses the y-axis and where the graph crosses the x-axis. Even further than that, a y-intercept happens when the x is equal to 0, and an x-intercept happens where a y is equal to 0. Also important is slope. Slope is the change in y over the change in x. By over I mean divide. We also refer to it as m and rise over run. Rise divided by run. Rise is the change in y and run is the change in x. And lastly is going to be the most useful form for graphing, which is slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. As you can see that our m is our slope and our y-intercept is our b. So let's do a very basic kind of graphing. We're just going to create a table. We're just going to plug in a bunch of x's, pump out different y's, plot those points, and then draw our line. Straight up, super simple. Let's pick some variety. Let's do some negatives and do some positives. You know, when I do them, I typically, if I can, I like to start with -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. This is a good range. Try some positives, some negatives, and also 0. So let's plug in our -2 into the x. That's -2 times 2. -4 plus 1 is -3. -1 plugged into the x is -1 times 2 is -2 plus 1. -2 plus 1 is -1. As you can see, we have a delta here. We have a difference. Our difference is adding 2 every single time. So our next number, when we plug in a 0 into this, would be 1. If we plug in a 1, we get 3. And if we plug in a 2, we get 5. Let's plot each of those points. -2, -3, -1, -1, 0, 1, 1, 3, and 2, 5. This is our line. Now don't forget, this is a line. Lines don't end, so make sure that you put arrows on both sides of this, because that line is going to continue forever. So that's very basic graphing, super easy. Just plug in the points, plot the points, and you get your line. But there are faster ways to graph. Faster ways to graph are using slope-intercept form. You need to know where to find the numbers and what they mean. If you remember, our formula is y equals mx plus b. M is the slope, b is the y-intercept. So our slope in this problem, which is m, is going to be equal to 3. But we need a rise and a run. So 3 over what? 3 over 1. And our b in this problem is a positive 5. So we have a y-intercept at positive 5. Now let's go ahead and graph it. All you have to do is put a dot at positive 5 for our y-intercept. Remember, this is y-axis, this is x-axis. And now from here, I want to rise 3 and run 1. Oh, crap. Our graph wasn't made that big. Well, that's not a problem, because if I can go up and to the right, I should also be able to go down and to the left. So down 3 and left 1 would also work. Let's do it again. Down 3 and left 1, down 3 and left 1. Yeah, I think that actually made a pretty good graph for us. So, being able to pick out the slope and the y-intercept makes graphing pretty quick. I am going to show you one last way to approach graphing linear functions. Not all linear functions are written with the y equals. Now, you could try to force this into saying y equals, but here's another option. Another option is to use the idea of intercepts. Remember, when we're doing intercepts, we're always plugging in a 0 for the one that we don't want to find. Think of this like a table. One where we want to plug in a 0 for x, but we also want to plug in a 0 for y. Now, if I plug in a 0 for x, 3 times 0 plus 2y equals 6. Now, a 3 and a 0 make nothing, and last I'd have to divide by 2. Our y would be equal to 3. Now let's plug in a 0 to the y to get the x-intercept. 3x plus 2 times 0 equals 6. So 2 times 0 makes nothing, and I divide both sides by 3, and I end up with an x equals a 2. And now we can go ahead and graph those 2 points. 0, 3 is right here, 2, 0 is right here, and then we can draw a line through both of them. So this is another way. By plugging in zeros into x and y, we can get 2 quick points, and through any 2 points can we draw the line. So there's 3 options we have here. 1, make a table, plug in a bunch of numbers, work it all out, and plot those points into a graph. The second way we could do this is through using slope-intercept form, figuring out what the m and the b is, the slope and the y-intercept, plotting those, and then we get our line. And the third option would be to use intercepts. Plug in a 0 for x, get a y-intercept. Plug a 0 in for y, get an x-intercept. 3 options, 3 good options, depending upon what you're given. But that pretty much covers graphing linear functions.